How do we respond to the news of now the fall of Matt Lauer? And how can we develop a true pro-life mentality?
It's time for The Line of Fire with your host, activist, author, international speaker, and theologian, Dr. Michael Brown, your voice of moral, cultural, and spiritual revolution. Michael Brown is the director of the Coalition of Conscience and president of Fire School of Ministry. Get into The Line of Fire now by calling 866-34-TRUTH. That's 866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
Well, it was headline news today. This is what you basically woke up with this morning. New York Times headlines, NBC fires Matt Lauer over sexual misconduct allegation. Wow. I mean, 1 minute it's NBC's Matt Lauer, and then it's CBS's Charlie Rose. I'm looking at a list here. NPR's Michael Oreskes, Amazon's Roy Price, New York Times, Glenn Thrush, and in Hollywood, from Harvey Weinstein to Kevin Spacey to Louis C.K. and others. Now in Congress, is it Al Franken, John Conyers? Who's next? How do we respond? Well, here's how President Trump responded. He tweeted this out. Wow, Matt Lauer was just fired from NBC for, quote, inappropriate sexual behavior in the workplace. But when will the top executives at NBC and Comcast be fired for putting out so much fake news? Check out Andy Lack's past. And then right after that, he tweeted a follow-up message, and it was this. So now that Matt Lauer is gone, when will the fake news practitioners at NBC be terminated the contract to Phil Griffin? And will they terminate low ratings Joe Scarborough based on the unsolved mystery that took place in Florida years ago? Investigate. Now, I understand that President Trump really sees the liberal media as his enemy, and for good reason. The reporting against him has been overwhelmingly negative, and as many mistakes as he's made, the media has piled on and added to it, and it's been ugly in its reporting. I understand that, but this is not the time to gloat. And with all respect to the office of the president, when you have glass houses in your own past, do you just say, well, investigate the glass houses in other people's past? I don't think that's the right way to respond. That's why I tweeted out, I don't recommend gloating when someone you don't like falls or is exposed. Better to grieve over their loss and take stock of the cost of sin. Better to stay low and search your own heart than to mock someone else's disgrace. And then author, professor, editor Jay Richards added in response, and never ever take pleasure in the destruction of anyone's marriage. Pray for them. If you really don't like them, pray even more for them. And then a woman by the name of Adelina added in Proverbs 24, 17, and 18 verses I thought of immediately today. Do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and let not your heart be glad when he stumbles, lest the Lord see it and be displeased and turn away his anger from him. Now look, I agree with the observations that the vast majority of these abuse cases or allegations of abuse are over on the left, the so-called champions of women's rights. Hey, if you want to encourage an abortion, you're not really for women. If you want to diminish the importance of gender distinctions, you're not really for women. If you want to do what Hollywood does and exalt women as sexual objects, you're not really for women. So I agree that conservative principles of life are much more honoring of women and much more protective of women. But I'm not going to sit here and throw stones. I mean, one day it's producers, another day it's politicians, another day it could be pastors and preachers. And even though most of us, hopefully the vast majority of us, have not done what some of these people are accused of doing, if God wanted to expose a wrong attitude, a wrong thought, a wrong word, a wrong deed in our lives, he could damn us all. So I say, when you see these things happen, be sober, grieve over the people's loss, pray for their repentance and redemption, and make sure your own house is in order. That, friend, is how we should respond. We'll be right back. You're listening to The Line of Fire. This is Michael Brown. You don't need a PhD to know that our world is in serious trouble. All it takes is one glance at your social media feed to see that we're at a critical time, not just in our nation's history, but in world history. And this generation of believers is facing an unprecedented barrage of attacks against the truth of the gospel, and they're coming from 1,000 different directions. If ever there was a time for the body to speak out, to raise a righteous standard, and to be a beacon of hope in the midst of a sea of despair, now is that time. Through preaching and teaching and radio and writing and social media, God's given us a voice. I mean, by His grace, many lives have been impacted for the gospel around the world. So it's for that reason I want to take you behind the scenes here at Ask Dr. Brown, let you know about some of the exciting projects we're involved in, and share with you how you can help us fulfill this great mandate from the Lord in this battle for the hearts and minds of a whole generation. Over the last several months, our studio has undergone a massive overhaul. We have put thousands of dollars into revamping what is basically our command central. This studio is not just used to produce the Line of Fire radio broadcast, but we also produce in this studio hundreds of YouTube videos that you see, as well as our media for other ministry outlets like God TV and NRB TV. So this studio is really the heartbeat of everything, all the media that we produce at Ask Dr. Brown. And now we are ready to step into a whole new realm, and we can do it with your help. So I'm asking you today to partner with us. Through your generous donations, we can fulfill this mandate from the Lord in this battle for the hearts and minds of a whole generation, and you can help amplify my voice. Friends, stand with us today. Together, we're making a difference.
Fire we want, for fire we please. Send the fire.
It's the Line of Fire with your host, Dr. Michael Brown. Get into the Line of Fire now by calling 866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
Thanks, friends, for joining us today on the Line of Fire. Hey, listen, I want to restate the obvious, but I am not here simply as a conservative talk radio host, nor am I simply on the radio as a preacher or a teacher. I'm here to be a gospel-based voice of moral and cultural revolution. I'm here to be your voice of moral sanity and spiritual clarity in the midst of a society and chaos and a church all too often in compromise. And therefore, what's happening around us, I want to give insight on. Now, every so often, we're just going to report something happening because it's important news. We want to share it, or we have limited time and just want to make sure you're aware of something. But 99.9% of what we do, we want to address issues, and we want to come with a kingdom perspective. We want to address things in a constructive way, in a way that will help you know how to sort these things out. There are enough people bashing on the left and on the right, and there's tons of great preaching and teaching on radio and TV and online and other places. So you can get all of that, and we've got plenty of our own preaching and teaching you can benefit from as well. On God TV, we've got a weekly preaching show called Word on Fire that airs on Sundays, where I preach on holiness and revival and repentance and themes that are dear to me. On our Ask Dr. Brown website, we have a sermon archive where you can listen to many of my past messages and some recent messages. So we make all that available to you at AskDrBrown.org. But we're on the radio primarily not to preach, not to teach, but to be your voice. So what do we do when we have these scandals taking place? And I don't watch a lot of TV news, and I don't watch the early morning shows. Number one, I'm a late night person, so I'm not watching early morning shows. Number two, it's never in my life habit has been part of what I watch. And number three, if I'm getting news, I'm normally getting it by reading it or by watching clips afterwards. Certainly, Matt Lauer, well known and greatly loved. And when I asked Nancy this morning, have you heard the latest news? She was, Matt Lauer? Are you serious? But we all know that these are TV personalities, and only God knows what's happening in people's private lives. But again, he was not one of the ones that you were expecting, or he's probably going to be next, right? So, how do we respond as believers to this? The list is getting longer and longer. There's an article from about a week ago now. It's entitled "From Politicians to Producers." Here are 50 prominent men accused of sexual misconduct since Weinstein's downfall. And it's got some of the pictures there, and some of them, they're just accusations against them. And the stars, or the celebrities, or the radio or TV, or whoever the people are, they're denying allegations. In other cases, they've admitted to them. It's not this just exploding. This has obviously been under the surface, and now it's coming to the surface. But you have to recognize this as a moment of divine shaking. You have to recognize this as one of those moments when a lot of stuff is getting uncovered. And you might say, well, good, I didn't like Al Franken. Well, I didn't like John Connor. Well, I didn't like Harvey Weinstein. I didn't like, oh, okay, fine. Maybe for one reason or another, you oppose the people politically or ideologically. You thought they were responsible for putting out smut or influencing the younger generation in a wrong way, or, okay, whatever. I mean, none of these people that were listed were on my list of personal heroes, or, yeah, that's the one I'm cheering for. Obviously, Judge Roy Moore, the best-known conservative now that's being accused, and we still don't know the truth there. Some are sure he's guilty. Some are sure he's not guilty. I can say for certainty we don't know with 100% certainty. All right, God knows, and the accusers and the accused know. But the list of people, I don't look to Hollywood in terms of ethics and morality. There's some good people there, but I don't look to Hollywood for that purpose. And Congress, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of confidence or hope that Congress is going to clean up its own act. In fact, my latest article that came out this morning dealt with that very issue. 3 ways that Congress might be forced to clean up its own act. And I suggested, it could be that someone like John Conyers, as Lauer said, you put too much pressure on him, he's going to bring others down. In other words, you got dirt on me, I got dirt on you. That's why we keep our mouths shut. Right? That coalition of silence. I got skeletons in my closet, you got them in yours, so we'll just keep the closet locked and throw away the key. Conyers, allegedly, may have the plan, as Lauer says, you put too much pressure on him, he's going to bring others down with him. How many others? That's one way Congress could be forced to clean up its own act. And another is if more and more people come forward and say, hey, you're guilty, you're guilty, you're guilty. More and more women speak up. More and more of those who've been harassed or abused speak up. And the charges are credible. Congress is going to have to act on it. And then thirdly, if they don't act on it, then the court of public opinion. People are just going to get fed up and not vote for certain candidates, and their own parties are going to have to replace them with other people. Who knows where this thing's going to shake down? At times like this, I don't sit around and gloat. Look, in the 1980s, many of you that are old enough remember this. Jim Bakker, prominent TV preacher, ended up in prison for years, wrote a book, I Was Wrong, publicly repented, and has sought to live a very different life since. And his TV show now is quite different from what it used to be. Whether you like Jim Bakker's TV show or not, it's poles apart from what it was years ago. So he gets exposed for sexual sin and then financial corruption, ends up going to jail, really getting the book thrown at him by a very hard judge, goes to jail for his financial crimes, and writes a book, I Was Wrong. So he gets exposed, and before everything else happened with the financial fraud and the jail sentence and the admission of guilt, then another prominent TV evangelist, Jimmy Swaggart, starts going after him with real ferocity. Instead of mourning over his fall, he was merciless. And I really liked Jimmy Swaggart. I loved his preaching. I loved his message of holiness. I remember, stand on the Bible, stand on the Word, and his gospel songs. And man, he was anointed. He was called. I didn't like Jim Baker's show in those days. I thought, the whole PTL thing, and I thought it was superficial. I'm just telling you what I thought, not that I'm God and making right judgment. I'm just telling you what I thought back then. I liked Jimmy Swaggart's preaching, hardcore gospel. But I remember when he was going after Jim Baker and mocking him after his fall, I just said, "Ooh, you don't do that. Don't want to do that. You don't want to set yourself up as the righteous one and, impeccable and flawless by mocking others. If you want to talk about the tragedy of it and the sin of it, do it with some brokenness." And not long after that, he gets exposed for sexual sin, and then not once but twice. I say all this with pain because I remember when this happened,